you have Matt Gaetz, who's a U.S. representative for Florida, and he put forward a bill to basically withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. Okay, and they had a vote about it, and obviously it failed. What do you expect? I think you had 321 votes against and 103 in favor. Right, and amongst those who voted in favor of it were AOC, who votes for these things when it doesn't make a difference, and so on and so on. You had some progressives, and I say this because it's a good thing that you have people all across the spectrum from both sides of the aisle who are in agreement on this, because it's obviously a very bad thing. Now, of course, I think they know from the get-go it's not going to pass, but let me show you an impassioned speech that he gave on the floor about this, and let's go through it.
How has it come to be that Syria has become the great platform of great power competition in the world?
Well, it always has been. I had to stop you right there. It always has been since the beginning of time, but okay.
How has it come to be that Syria has become the great platform of great power competition in the world? Begins in 2011 during the Arab Spring, when Assad, who is undeniably a madman and a despot, opens fire.
I have to stop you right there, Matt. Why do people always make the case for, leaving Syria the hell alone? Have to go with this. Look, they always start with, look, I know Assad is XYZ, but no, you don't. It's not a prerequisite. You can just make the case, right? No one is going to come and beat you on the hand with a ruler or give you a minus point because you said that. Just go ahead with it. You don't have to do. You don't have to do the old.
God, who is undeniably a madman and a despot, opens fire on his own people protesting. Then part of the Syrian army defects. They engage in warfare against Assad, and all of a sudden, they got a whole lot of weapons and money being sent from the rich Gulf monarchies through Jordan into Syria. So Iran's not just going to watch this.
Yeah, so far so good. I mean, there are of course some points that we could disagree on, but I don't understand why he leaves out the United States. Now, again, I'm trying not to give him crap because the aim of the bill is positive. Fine. But he should mention Operation Timber Sycamore. You guys know what that is. That's $1 billion operation. I think it's one of the biggest CIA operations, although, one of the biggest that we know about. And it's basically after they took down Libya, they started pumping all of the, because Gaddafi, he not only had a lot of gold, he had a lot of weapons. Right, man, Gaddafi was really funny. He would anyone with a cause against the West, or he would just start sending them weapons. Right, you had people in the IRA who he'd send weapons to all the way up in Ireland. So he had a lot of weapons, and they took those weapons and started sending them. This is the CIA I'm talking about now. They took the weapons from Libya and started sending them into Syria. So he's correct. He mentions all the Gulf monarchies, but it's also the United States, right? And it's from early on. It's not something that just happened later by accident. Anyway, I'll let him continue.
Syria. So Iran's not just going to watch this. Assad's their ally. They activate Hezbollah. They then invade Syria. So now you've got Jordan, the Gulf monarchies.
No, hold on, man. I'm really trying my best not to, because we have to go point by point. Otherwise, we'll get lost. Look. Hezbollah, they can't invade Syria because they were invited there. There's an official invitation. I've never heard of a country that was invaded by someone they asked to be there. So this doesn't really work. But okay, he's correct. Yes, Iran and Hezbollah come in to help Syria. That's correct. Yes.
Iran, but wait. Russia is pitching their vision of the world as a regime preservation force, whether you're Maduro or Assad. So they get involved, and what do they get for their time? A warm water port in the Eastern Mediterranean.
No, again, this is wrong. First of all, that port has existed since the 1970s, so I have no clue what this has to anything. The irony is that this port that he's talking about was crumbling by the time Russia came in. So it achieved the exact opposite. By trying to wage this war against Syria, you have increased Iranian influence, right? And and increased Russian influence in Syria. So if that was your objective was to get rid of it, congratulations, you screwed up. So once again, this port that he's talking about in Latakia, which it's correct, it's on the Mediterranean, was basically an old hangar by the time Russia gets in. Now it's the opposite. They've completely modernized it. It's state of the art. So that port has existed for 50 years. Okay. Now the other thing is that he says like Russia's trying to pitch some, regime preservation. That was a mouthful. It was very funny. That's also not true, because Russia had already been asked to help a couple of years before, if I'm not mistaken, by Syria, and they said no. So Russia had to be talked into this escapade, right? They needed some convincing, and you'll recall there's a nice, interesting video where the head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, is being interviewed, and he describes. He wasn't there, right? But he knows the details of how this went down. And you have Soleimani, who travels to Moscow, and he has a sit down with Putin. And it's like in the movies, you got the map on the table and everything. And he goes through this with Putin for 2 hours, and by the end of the meeting, Putin is convinced, and that's all it took. I think this, obviously, it's not just about putting down a map and like pointing fingers at a map or something. I think it had a lot to do also with Russia kind of understanding that it's of the most importance, because Damascus is about to fall. And it's not that they care that much about this port in Latakia. It's nothing to do with that, but that this is basically going to continue eastward, right? And you can see right now, I mean, the irony, it has literally transpired, right? What are you seeing in Ukraine? What you're seeing in Ukraine right now on Russia's doorstep, this is, the beginnings of that were happening back then in 2014, 2015, 2016, right? So this prophecy has just come to pass and transpired. But in any case, I don't want to get too carried off. I just want to respond to these points. Again, I'm not trying to like crap on him or anything, or nothing to do with that. I wanted to go through them with you because they're important. I'll let the man continue.
So we've got Russia, the Gulf monarchies. Israel starts to get worried about Hezbollah and Iran. So Israel cuts a deal with Russia to keep Iran out of southern Syria. And then somehow the United States in 2015 says, you know what? We need to get involved in this mess in Syria. And since we...
What? Look, man, his timeline is all off. But 2015, because he mentions the Russians were nothing to do with this by 2015, right? It's just more like 2016. But the Americans have been involved since 2011, right? You can go read these cables from the embassies. And they're already saying in 2006, we want to enact some regime change in Syria. It's nothing new. I don't, I'm a bit, I don't, it's nothing controversial. I shouldn't have to explain this, right? I wish this point didn't go over his head, or maybe, you know what? I just realized these guys have like 1 minute to speak. So to give him credit, to his credit, he is laying out most of the facts correctly, and to give him the benefit of the doubt, he probably doesn't have a lot of time to speak like I can take now, right? He doesn't have the liberty to go into too many details. But fine, I want to say these because somebody might listen to that and they don't understand the background information. That's why I'm here. I'm here to give you the context and to provide it to you. Okay, let him continue.
We have been there. We have seen Americans die. We have seen tens of billions of dollars wasted. And what is hilarious about the 2001 AUMF that the neoconservatives wave around like some permission slip for every neoconservative fantasy of turning an Arabian desert into a Jeffersonian democracy is that very 2001 AUMF would justify attacking the people that we're fighting against and the people we're funding. Because both have ties to al-Qaeda, and of course the 2001 AUMF dealt with al-Qaeda.
That neoconservative payment slip. He's right on the money. This is the thing that I tell you guys a million times about the AUMF. He nailed it. He nailed it. It's a neocon payment slip, right? It's this one page. I'm not even kidding you. It's one page, barely. You know, if you actually put the text into a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs without the spaces, it's one page, right? And it's this authorization for the use of military force, which again, actually, if you consider it, it's a worthless piece of paper that only has any legal value in America. You know, just let me give you an example. If in Sweden they pass a law saying that they can invade New York, does that mean that they have the right to invade New York? No, it's just a Swedish thing in their, you know, in their jurisdiction. It's just an example. So it's the same applies here. You know, just because they say, oh, we can attack. I wish they even mentioned. You know, the Taliban or Afghanistan by name. You see, that's the whole trick. They don't even mention a country in this AOMF. There's no country mentioned, and the whole point of that, I don't think they even mention Al-Qaeda, right? They just mentioned those who attacked us on 9/11. They've made it as legally abstract as possible. So anybody who attacked us on 9/11 and aided those who attacked us. So this is so ambiguous. You can stretch it out to be whatever you want. And, you know, it's ridiculous, right? Because as Mr. Gaetz correctly points out, Al-Qaeda, you can trace back its origins to U.S. funding, and now it's the U.S. fighting them, right? But I'll let him continue to just finish off his last couple of thoughts.
All this talk about a reemergence of ISIS, I would encourage my colleagues to go read the Inspector General's report of the last quarter that indicates that ISIS is not a threat to the homeland. And with the Turks conducting operations in Syria against ISIS, with Assad and Russia having every incentive to create pressure on ISIS, I do not believe that what stands between a caliphate and not a caliphate are the 900 Americans who have been sent to this hellscape with no definition of victory, with no clear objective.
I just want to say a word about these descriptions that they offer, right? Like, why are these Americans in this hellscape? Why are they in this desert? No. Look, man, if anyone made it a hellscape, it's you. Yeah, you know, sanctions really bite. Arming jihadists really bites. But to get back to the main point, he is correct. It's not 900 Americans guarding oil fields who are going to, you know, prevent a resurgence of a caliphate. Because why is this brought up? Because this is the justification for the American presence, right? In their own eyes. So you have to have these guys here, or else ISIS will come back. Once again, why is ISIS there? Could you remind me? Why is ISIS there? It's because you invaded Iraq, you got rid of Saddam Hussein, and then you tried doing the same in Syria, and you left a giant patch of land with nobody to rule it. And when that happens, you know, you have basically battle of the fittest, and the toughest and the cruelest gang emerges, and it's ISIS. And you know, you're none other. You've got none other than the US and all these Gulf monarchies that he mentioned, and the UK and so on to blame. I'll read you just his statement after the vote failed, right? Because it didn't do too well, as I told you. I think he put out a statement afterwards. He says there are 1,500 different groups in Syria. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, today's friend is tomorrow's ISIS. Yeah. And he says, do we have to keep 900 Americans in Syria until the last heartbeat stops of the last person who holds some sympathy for ISIS? I would certainly hope not. It would mean we would have to be there forever. The way that this is spoken about is like America's the victim somehow. It's not true. But I understand the point he's making. And down here he says, often our Americans are guarding these oil fields. Yes, because that was my criticism of his speech. He didn't mention the oil. And he does mention it here. Okay, so this is a more fuller transcript. He says, often our Americans are guarding these oil fields where the Iranians are sending kamikaze drones. And I am shocked that we have not had escalatory accident or even more casualties for our U.S. service members. I would add, they're not just Iranian kamikaze drones. They're drones from, the resistance. You don't know who needs to... You don't need to know who's firing them because it's all one group, right? So when I say one group, I mean an alliance. So you have Hashd Shabi, you have it could be any one of them, right? And it's important he mentions oil fields because those are the only places they are there. And I don't know if he's mentioned the sanctions as well, because the point also is not, he doesn't mention them, but the point is not just to take the oil, and you can go online, and I've shown you these videos, or just look through the channel of these like convoys. You've got like 40, 60, 80 American trucks and vehicles just moving all of this oil from the oil fields in Syria through Al Walid border crossing into Iraq. And it's not just about stealing the oil, it's also about making sure that Syrians have no oil and also Syrians have no food. Okay, so this is kind of like the stick that physically implements the Caesar Act sanctions, right? Although once again, just by virtue of the sanctions being in place, everyone becomes afraid to deal with whoever the target of the sanctions happens to be, and then that target becomes isolated, hungry, and so on. And in this case, it's the Syrian people. So I think it's funny. It's funny. You have people on the right who, or shall we say, well, you guys know my views on right and left in America. They're really pretty much the same thing. But let's say in the American right, like Mr. Gaetz, who are putting these propositions forward, and it's good. And I say funny in the sense that even they get it, because the right, the Republican Party, are the neoconservatives. They're the ones who's kind of started this whole thing. And as he correctly points out, the AOMF 2001. So it's a shame though that most of them vote against it, and I think it really says a lot. Why would you vote against such a simple thing like what? Just removing 900 troops from Syria. What are they even doing in Syria? And most of them say no, let's keep them there. Most of that includes most Democrats and most Republicans. And this speaks to the whole war machine we've talked about many, many times. It's a bipartisan thing. It's a bipartisan war machine. And we need the mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream in politics to understand that this stuff is wrong and deadly, and to assume the other position, right? That's what we need to achieve. Unfortunately, that's not the case yet. But I thought it was an interesting proposition by Mr. Gaetz, and even though I had some comments to say, well done, and hopefully the next time they bring this up, it'll be actually a pass. But of course, I doubt if it were ever to hit the president's desk that it would receive a signature, unfortunately.